we will create a couple of tests today, and they are very common tests that probably everyone, well, at least one of them is the kind of test that everyone will need to create, which is a login test. And I'll show you how to also embed that in other tests and why that's a good idea. We'll be using Spotify today because we used Airbnb so many times that it gets very predictable, and we wanted to get something a bit more interactive as well, and then sort of a different kind of app. So Spotify seems like something interesting. So let's jump in. I'm going to create a new test, and I don't yet have Spotify defined as a site, so I'm going to specify it here. And I'm also going to make sure it's a US site because I'm located in Germany. So, and by default, that would go to a German site. And I don't necessarily want to show you the German version. So that creates the test. And as the page is loading, as always, the VM opens and starts navigating to the page that I've specified. I'm just going to adjust the title. This will be a login test. So I'm going to call it Spotify login. And that will make it sort of easier to find later on. So to log in to pretty much any app, the workflow is almost the same in every case. You click on some kind of login button or login link, you fill in your email and password, and you click login, and then you just verify that you are logged in fact. So this is what we'll do here. Let's just go through this flow here in the VM, and then we'll create the actions on the left side to reflect it. So login link is here, so we'll click on that. Then we have a couple of different options to log in. We're going to be using the email and password option, and then click on login, and then verify that we can see our account page. Pretty straightforward. So let's start creating these actions. The first one will be a click action. And we will click on this, which is the login link. And every time I'm creating a screenshot, I'm also going to be giving this element a name. And that helps when you're executing this test with the tester crowd. And it also just makes it a bit more obvious what you're trying to do. Even though in this case, it's pretty obvious. This is a login link. And also, every time I create an action, I try to preview it to make sure that it's actually doing what I would expect it to do. And as this is executing, I'm going to start creating the next action, which is going to be filling in the email and password in the fields here. So fill action is what we want to do here. We want to fill in this field, which is the email field. And we want to fill it in with an email. And now this is where things get a little bit interesting. What I've done ahead of time is I've created a tabular step variable that contains Spotify logins. So the way this works is, obviously, this is a Spotify production page, which I don't control. So I've just created a couple of test accounts, and I've used the credentials from these accounts to put them in Rainforest as tabular step variables. In your case, when you're testing your own application or a QA environment of your application, you can create as many accounts as you want, and then you can have a CSV file that lists all the email and password pairs, and then upload it to Rainforest, and then we'll be able to use that to actually perform the test. And we can talk more about that afterwards if you're interested. But for now, all you need to know is that if you choose this step variable, so Spotify logins email, this will not paste this value with the curly braces, but will actually get the actual email address that I've defined and paste it in instead. So I'm going to preview that and then do exactly the same thing for the password. So another fill action. But this time, instead of Spotify logins email, I'm going to enter Spotify logins password. And I'll take a screenshot of this and call it the password field. Cool. Let's see how this works. And as you've seen, the action 3 pasted this particular value in here. Okay, and finally, we need to click on the login button. I'm sorry if you hear my son in the background. He's particularly excited today. about things. Okay, clicking on login. Great. We're now logged in. We could also create an action to accept this cookie banner. And in fact, maybe let's do that. It's not strictly necessary for this action, but it's probably the kind of thing that you want to do in most tests. So we might as well do this here. So I'm going to click on it. And finally, we want to verify that we are actually logged in. You've probably noticed that this particular cookie banner was present before as well, so it doesn't prove that we are logged in. What seems like a good idea is this little profile icon and name here that only shows up once we're logged in. So I'm going to create the last action in this test, which is C, that verifies that this particular element is visible. I'm going to call it a profile icon. Great. So that is our test. I'm going to save it, and also I'm going to run it as a standalone test, just to make sure that it passes. I've made sure that it passes by previewing all the actions individually here, but it's always a good idea to sort of run the whole test and make sure it works as a whole. So I'm going to kick it off and then let it run in the background as we're creating the next test.
Maciej, we just had a question come through about the element names and how that's used in the crowd test. Could we show folks how that shows up?
Absolutely. So thank you for that. So there are two ways to view the test that you just created. One is here on the left. You have a list of actions, and they have some attributes and screenshots. But when you run this test with the crowd or with the testing community instead of automation, they will see something like this. So they will see a translation, an alternative representation of the same test, and that's just text. And basically, we take something like click on login. This is an action, and we translate it into the sentence. Click on the login link. When they hover over the words login link, they see the screenshot. But the words login link are the thing that you need to sort of explain to them what it is that you're asking them to do. If you don't enter anything, they will just have sort of a gray square, and they'll hover over it, and they see the screenshot, and they'll figure it out. The test will probably pass, but it just makes it much easier for people to read when you use the descriptions, and also it gives you a good overview what it is that you're trying to do. Because cases like this login link is pretty obvious, but there are cases where you take a screenshot and you know what you're doing as you're writing the tests, but a couple of days later you might come back and you're like, what was exactly this thing? And giving its name helps to sort of disambiguate that. So it's generally a good practice to do that, even if you're always running automation.
Thank you.
Sure thing. So let's create the second test. And the second test will do something else, but it needs to log in to do anything. This is sort of a very common pattern. So I'm going to create a test that creates a playlist for you. I'll choose Spotify. And again, I'll make sure that we are at the US-based site. So now that we have our login test, let's see, did it already finish? Oh, it's just finishing now. Great timing. So our standalone login test just passed. So you can see all the actions as they were being performed. You have the video as usual and the test completed. So we know it does what we expect. So, oh, Airbnb. Sorry, I must have used the wrong site. Spotify.com/US. This is something we need to iron out. So I'm not sure what happened there, but I think I've just selected the wrong site ahead of time. So this seems like the right address. So I'm going to preview this to make sure it navigates to the place we expect. So let's talk about embedding. So the test we just created is a login test, and it's kind of useful to have a login test on its own, but it's also useful because pretty much everything you do in your app is probably behind a login screen. So this is a common part of most of our test suites. And it's good to make it reusable. So if anything changes on your login page, you can edit a single test and it will be reflected in all the other tests that use it. And the mechanism for doing this is what we call embedded tests. So when you're adding an action, you have a list of actions that we've defined here. But if you keep scrolling, you also see all of your tests that are embeddable in this current test. So the one we're looking for is Spotify login. So if you just start typing, it will do a search. And here's our test. And by the way, I'm showing you a little sneak peek at our beta interface. So this might be something that you haven't seen yet. A few of you are in the beta, so you already have this turned on. For those of you who don't, we'll make this generally available at the beginning of January. But we wanted to sort of show off what we've been working on for the past couple of weeks. And that is basically making embedded tests a little bit easier to work with. So you could use them before, but we made some improvements to hopefully make it a bit more efficient for everyone. So the way this works is that now I have this test, which starts at Spotify, and then just basically copies the action from the login test and does them, and then I can do other things afterwards. I can look into this test to see what it's doing. And when I do that, you see that this is the test that I've just defined before. And we can play it either one by one or the entire embedded test as well. Or you can collapse it if you sort of just want to abstract it away. So I'll play it in a second, but actually let me play it right now and make sure that we can log in. And then we will figure out how to do the next part, which will be creating a playlist. And that will also illustrate a couple of interesting features that you might want to use. I'm just thinking if there's anything else I should mention about embedded tests. The one other thing that's I wanted to mention is sort of the ability to create a hierarchy with embedded tests. The other thing that we've added in the new interface that I'm showing you is the ability to deeply nest embedded tests. So up until now, you could only sort of have one test embedding one other test. Once we make this generally available, you'll be able to have a deeper hierarchy of tests that embed other tests, And obviously that increases complexity a little bit, but it also makes it much more powerful and makes your test suite more maintainable. Okay, so now we are logged in. Our embedded test worked. Just to make sure I don't forget what this test is, I'm going to call it Spotify Create a Playlist. And what we want to do now is create a playlist. To do that, we need to go from our account to the Spotify player, which is a different URL. So I'm going to navigate to, if I remember right, it's open spotify.com. So let's make sure that works. And navigate action simply puts the URL into the browser and presses enter. Great. So that's our Spotify player. We want to create a playlist, like I mentioned. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do it by, well, first maybe let's just create actions. So there's a link here to create playlists. So I'm going to create a click action to click on that. And I'm not going to select anything else, just this one action and preview it. Okay, cool. So we have a new playlist. Let's give it a name and add at least one song to it, and then make sure that the state is as we expect. So what we're going to do is to edit the name of the playlist, we have to click on this large title. So I'm going to create another click action. that captures it. Actually, I'll change the screenshot a little bit, and I'm going only to capture my playlist. And the reason for that is we have this number 1 here. If I just keep creating playlists, we'll have my playlist 1, my playlist 2, and so on. And this is probably fine, but just in case, I don't really care about the number. I do care about the exact title that I want to click on. So even if this ends up being my playlist 3 for some reason, the click will still succeed. And the other thing I want to do here is disable content matching. And this is something that you need to sort of figure out what to do sort of case-by-case basis. But in this case, I want to disable content matching because content matching works based on text. And in this case, I care about the exact appearance of this title, mostly because there's another element with the same text that's much smaller here on the left. So right now, whether I enable content matching or not, things will work just the same because we always prioritize visual match, and this is still exactly what we screenshotted. However, if at some point this changed, we would fall back to content matching and looking for things by text. And at that point, it would be hard to predict whether we would end up clicking on this big title or the small title because they say the same thing and the text is the same, which is why I'm disabling content matching, because there's this sort of the same text in 2 places and I want to make sure I click on the right one. So let's execute that action. And now we want to enter a new name. So I'm going to fill this text field. And even though this text field is already filled with the value, my playlist 1, that doesn't matter. We can still use this action because it will clear the field before entering the new value. And keeping with the season, we'll create a Christmas playlist. Great. Finally, we click on Save. Okay, we have our playlist. That's good. If that was the end of the test, we could verify that we can see the right title here, but we'll keep going and sort of we'll verify things implicitly as we go along. I'm going to save the changes just to make sure I don't lose any of them. Now I want to find a song and add it to this playlist. So let me find a song. I'm going to click on Search. I realize I was not entering descriptive names for all the elements. So that's something I'll need to rectify after the fact. Okay, clicked on search. And now let's search for a song. And I could just use a type action because the focus in the browser is already on the right field, or I could use the fill action, which focuses on it and then types, but I might as well just type. Let's see, some song. Not sure this counts as a Christmas song, but at least no one was expecting that.
It's still very timely.
Okay, perfect. We found a Rick Astley song. So what we want to do next is add it to our playlist. And there are a couple of ways of doing it. I could click somewhere here on properties and add it to playlist. I could go to playlist and maybe search from there. Or I could drag my song and drop it onto the playlist. And let's do that. So the drag action takes 2 screenshots. The first one is the thing that you want to grab. So we'll select this. And I'm just going to call this the song. And we want to drop it onto the playlist. And let's see how this works. I think the drag action is one of my favorite ones to watch, because with most actions you don't really see much happening, but this one actually has a little smooth dragging action that you can see in real time. Okay, cool. The song is added to the playlist. Let's go back to our playlist and verify that it contains the song. And that will be our test. I might as well just click here. Perfect. We have, oops. I'm going to use a C action to verify that the album cover is visible. Okay. So I think this is our test. As last time, I'm going to save the changes and run it. And in the meantime, we can talk about any questions that that you have.
Sure, a couple have come through.
Cool.
Somebody is asking where they can find the list of actions that are available to use in that step.
Great question. So if you go to our app, there is a little link in the bottom left corner to our documentation. Help docs. And our help docs have a whole section on automation specifically. So if you just search for automation, there's an article called Actions and Assertions. And that lists all the actions that we have. And assertions are things like see, disappear, and so on. And that gives you sort of exhaustive information about every action, what kind of parameters it has, and so on. For example, press key action is interesting because you can do things like press Control-Tab or Control-F, which are sometimes useful, but it is not exactly obvious to work with. So this help book will help you out if you need any of that. And it's useful to just skim through and see all the actions. And they also, of course, come up if when you're adding an action. Oh, sorry. You have your list of actions here that you can also just scroll through, but the help docs give you all the context as well.
Great, thanks. And then another one around embedded tests. It looks like you can edit the embedded test from that page. Is that possible, or how do you go about doing that when you're working on a test within a test?
Great question. Currently, you cannot edit this. This is something that we will get to. But for now, you need to click on this icon to open this test in a new tab and edit it there. So eventually, you will be able to edit it. But for now, this test is not editable as you're working on the parent test, and you have to edit it separately. But you can replay actions individually or preview them individually.
All right, one more before you move on. What other tests would you think about creating if you were like newly building a test suite for Spotify, other than like the login and create a playlist?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important ones, if not the most important one, is testing your sign-up flow. Obviously, everyone cares about the new user experience being good, and making sure that your new users can sign up is important. So this is another common test that I think is good to do in most scenarios. The challenge with that is, of course, you have to be able to reset the environment between the runs, or maybe use unique emails and so on. So that, if you control the environment, it's kind of easy. But the reason I didn't do this today is because I wanted to use Spotify because it's something that everyone knows. Another test I could think of is, just sort of basic Spotify functionality. Searching for a song, we kind of tested it, but we could do a bit more in depth there. Can you play a song? Can you rewind? Can you skip? Maybe shuffle? Although I don't know, that would be very easy to test. The other thing that would be interesting, and I don't know, it probably doesn't fall into basic tests, but Spotify has this cool functionality of playing things on multiple devices. So that would be a very interesting test to write, because it's not something that is sort of easily doable in other ways of testing. So I'll be tempted to give that a shot, but it probably is not it's not a basic test. I think the way I think about it is, what are the actions that all of your users take? In case of Spotify, is obviously logging in, opening the app, and playing a song. So this gives you a trunk, and from there you can think of, okay, next thing to do is maybe share the song with someone, or make it favorite, make sure that all the songs are in favorites, and so on. So I think that's how I would think about it. If you have another analogy might be Google Analytics. If you've used Google Analytics, you probably remember this kind of view that shows you different URLs and different user flows between your pages, and there, the flows are kind of getting from the thickest flows, where there are lots of users, they kind of branch out into thinner and thinner. If you look at that kind of visualization and look at the sort of thickest path through your pages, that gives you a good idea of, okay, this is the kind of thing that everyone does, so I should probably test it.
That's a great analogy. I actually hadn't heard that one. That's pretty cool. A good way to think about it. We just had another question come through before you move on.
Great.
When you're previewing the test, does the embedded test preview every time as well, or does it skip that part?
So yeah, it depends. If you select it, it will preview. So if I select all the actions, then everything inside the embedded test will also preview one by one. But you don't have to select it, and if you don't, then only the selected actions will play.
Got it. Okay. Anything you wanted to show before we move on to the next question?
I think this was pretty much it. I'm really curious to look at the result, which is still in progress. But no, there's nothing else there yet. Oh, there's a question from Lindy as well.
Yes. Yep. If your
So,
sign-up flow includes confirming from your email, could you include the test steps for going to your Gmail to verify your sign-up?
oh, Lindy, this is such a great question. I would almost think we came up with it, but we didn't. Because it gives us an opportunity to talk about random.inbox and random.email. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, but yes, that's exactly right. When you sign up for stuff, you usually use an email address, and then you need to verify your account. So you go to your email, you open it, you click on the verify link. And that's something you can do. Yes, you could do it with Gmail, and to do that, you would probably need to have a bunch of step variables set up with Gmail addresses that you control. So you can sign up with this Gmail address, go there and verify. And you can do all that, but you can also use a built-in functionality of Rainforest, which is random email and random inbox. So I'm just going to quickly show you how this works. I'm going to use a different example. Yes, it will just be a quick demo. So the way this works is we are creating sort of virtual, pretty much throwaway mailboxes for you if you want. So if you want a random email address, you can choose a step variable called random.email. And I'm going to paste it into the URL bar, which normally does make sense, but I just want to demonstrate what kind of email it gives you. So if I preview it, I'm not sure why it's not pasting yet. Let's do it differently. the other thing you can do is take the value of the variable and copy it into the virtual machine, and then you can just interact with it and paste. And so again, because this is a URL bar, this is not the best demonstration, but it shows you, okay, this generated some random email address. It's a bunch of random words that don't mean anything. They're just unique. And the other cool thing is that you can then actually go to this mailbox. If you navigate to random.inbox, this will be the inbox that is tied to the email address that you've used. So impressed, Sal Brown, millipede, more or less is what our email address is like. So I'm just going to visit that mailbox as well. And that shows you the mailbox. So currently it's empty. There's nothing in here. But if you sign up with this particular email, we will actually receive the real email. You'll be able to click on it, open it, and click on the verification link as well. Okay, our test failed, which is interesting. Let's see what happened. So we can see that all the actions until this succeeded. I know what happened. I did not reset the state. Let's run through and see the progress. So the test proceeded up to clicking my playlist, but there was it clicked on a different element, not quite what we were intending. Yes, so I think the problem was that Christmas playlist already existed, and then the state of the application was not pristine. So there was conflict with what we were expecting and what automation saw, and that's why it failed. And this is why it's important to make sure that before you run your tests, if you are using something that's application that you change the state of, you need to reset it between runs. And usually you do it using something like a webhook, or in your CI/CD pipeline, you make sure that your database is reset. In this case, I should have done this manually before I kicked off the test to sort of clean up the things that we've created.
Oh, thank you for that. I think we have another one from Raj that just came through.
Cool. So can the test recorded on Chrome work on other browsers, or will there be issues due to different placement of elements? Yeah, so this is sort of an in-depth question, and it depends. I'm afraid there's not a straight answer. In some cases it will work, in some cases it won't. A lot of the functionality of browsers nowadays is very, very common. So there's not, it doesn't happen that frequently that you have drastic differences in layout. And in many cases, you might find that if you take one screenshot on Firefox, it will work on Chrome and vice versa. But there's no guarantee. And there will be cases where things break. So if you, what we currently recommend as a sort of a general solution is if you write a bunch of automation tests, run them on a single browser frequently. If it's in your CI/CD or even more often than that, run it on a single browser automatically, because that's cheap and quick. And then if you need multi-browser coverage, take the same tests and run them with the testing community, and then you can run them on multiple browsers, because our testing community is able to look at these kinds of differences and basically compensate for them. So if I just remove these two actions to not mess up my tests, I wanted to show you how to run this with testing community. So when you run the test in the module here, you can select either automated execution or testing community. So automation service or testing community. And if you use testing community, you can select more browsers as well. And they are likely to work, because our testers will be able to sort of look at these differences and say, okay, this login button doesn't look exactly like I see in the screenshot, but it's still clearly the same login button, so I'm going to click on that. One other thing to mention is content matching. So even though this particular title, for example, my playlist, maybe it will look slightly different between different browsers, but if you use content matching, that will still give you a chance to match it. So this one won't work because I've explicitly disabled content matching, but by default, content matching is on. So most cases, for example, this is probably going to work across browsers because you can use content matching. Yeah, sure. There's also a question about does random email in inbox expand to random Google Drive that can store files to upload and download during tests? So that currently does not exist. What you can do, however, is download the files locally to the virtual machine. The VMs that we have full operating systems. So this one is Windows 10. And if you download the file, you can open it in File Explorer. Oh, sorry, that's File Explorer options. It's been a while since I've used Windows. That's embarrassing, but anyway, you get my point. This is basically a full computer running in there, so you can look at your files, you can download them, you can modify them on disk, and you can re-upload them afterwards. I think, yeah, we can consider adding Google Drive for this kind of thing as well, and maybe Dropbox and so on, but it's not been something that we've heard requested before.
I'm glad we can help, Lindy. If we don't have any other questions from participants, I was going to say it might be a nice idea to go over how tabular variables work, since we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, sounds great. So tabular variables are, just to remind everyone, these are these variables that you can use to define things like Spotify logins.email and Spotify logins.password, that the values that come from you. So the reason we're calling them tabular variables is because you basically upload a big table of them, and I'll show you how to do that. And then the values are controlled by you, and they're opposed to things like random.email, which are defined by Rainforest. So you don't have to do anything, they're already there. Whereas with tabular stub variables, you need to provide the values yourself. So let me show you how to do that. When you go to settings and step variables, that shows you that we have, I wouldn't worry about custom variables for now. Tabular variables are the ones that are interesting, and they're basically a big table of data. So you take a CSV file, and let's say we want to add a new one. And if we wanted to test, I don't know, Amazon, we could do Amazon logins, and then find the CSV file that we want to upload, which I currently don't have, so I won't show you the whole flow. But I would choose the file, and the file would be a CSV file. So the first column is the names of the column. So in this case, it would be like emails and passwords, and then every other row would be email, comma, password. And we would take that and turn it into variables that you can then use in your test. So if you define this, you would then go to your test and do Amazon logins.email to fill in the email, and Amazon logins.password to fill in the password. And whichever, if you use a variable once in the test, if you use it the second time, we'll use the same exact value. So you can think of it in this CSV file, there's this row of data, and it gets, this single row gets assigned to the entire sort of execution of a single test. And if you run multiple tests or multiple browsers, they will each get a different row, but within a single execution, a single row is shared.
Great, thank you. I think that is everything. Any more questions from participants?
Great.
Well, thanks for demoing that to us. That was super helpful. And thanks everyone for participating. I'll definitely send out the recording of this. And if you have any comments or suggestions or further questions, please feel free to email me or your CSM, and we can direct them to Mache as necessary. But thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.